The following research is part of the National Institute for Congestion Reduction funded by the United States Department of Transportation through the University Transportation Center program. Learn more at www.nicr.usf.edu.
Welcome to Out of My Lane, a podcast of the Center for Urban Transportation Research at the University of South Florida in Tampa. I'm Wayne Garcia, your host. Today, we're with Dr. Fred Mannering and Dr. Chanyoung Lee, who have partnered on multiple research endeavors at CUTR. Dr. Mannering is the executive director of CUTR. He's a USF College of Engineering professor of civil and environmental engineering. Dr. Lee is the director of the Motorcycle Injury Prevention Program at CUTR. And so therefore, we're going to talk about motorcycle injury prevention today, or motorcycle safety. And it's a really interesting topic because the statistics about injuries in crashes to motorcyclists is certainly well out of line with the number of motorcyclists who are out there on the road. So something clearly is going on. So thank you, gentlemen, for joining us.
Thank you.
Pleasure to be here.
Good. So one of the things we do on the show is we start off asking our guests about their daily commute to work, although there's no more typical daily commute to work in the post-pandemic era, if we're even in that. And Dr. Mannering has been on an episode and told us, but we're really interested in. Dr. Lee, tell us about your commute.
My commute. I live in close to downtown, so I think I consider myself the reverse commute. So I'm coming toward the USF from the downtown in the morning. But as much as I want to be able to work with other people, I hate driving. But as we all know, we don't have that much of great options other than just driving. And then also I need to drop my daughter at the school, which dominate my morning commute.
All right. I know your commute well because I live in South Tampa and I take the same route. It's always nice to be going the other way from all the traffic. You don't always have that choice in life, but...
And then when you see that other people are stuck in the traffic, that's more even better.
Yeah. And inspiration for you all for what you do in trying to reduce congestion out there on the roads. We do want to talk about motorcycle safety. And I know, Fred, you're a motorcycle rider. Correct?
Yes.
And Chanyoung, do you have a motorcycle?
I do have an endorsement from the government, not from my wife.
Okay.
Yes. So let me say that way.
Yeah, I think that's a really good place to start because I think there's a lot of people, either parental pressure, spousal pressure. So let's talk about the motorcycle because it's a unique form of transportation that has all of this, as much as cars have created our culture, there's a whole set of subcultures around motorcycles. What is the role of the motorcycle in America today in terms of the transportation mix, in terms of our culture?
I think I can start by saying the motorcycle is a symbol of freedom. And that's how it's been marketed and also how it has been perceived in this country. It's a mode of transportation, certainly, but especially in the United States, is a symbol of the freedom. The man get into the two wheels and in the open road, the feeling of the environment, the smells of the street. That's like how you define the motorcycles. And of course, it moves the people from location A to the B, so it's a transportation. But as I mentioned before, the motorcycle in the United States about the 3% of registered vehicle. There's a little bit of difference between this, like among the different states. But I would say compared to the car, it's just such a small segment.
And yet motorcycle crashes are not 3% of all the crashes.
Yes. Unfortunately, we see state like Florida that you can ride 12 months that will have above like 16-17% of annual traffic fatalities. And nationwide, they were including the state like you can only ride 6 months like Wisconsin. So it will be like down to 13 to the 15%, but still it's pretty high compared to considering the 3% of registered motor vehicles. And then the other factor is there are people riding a motorcycle more than 10,000 miles per year, but most of the riders, they don't ride that much of distance. So considering a VMT is even more serious number, like that 15 to 17% of annual fatalities.
Yeah. Fred, do you have any near misses?
Oh, yeah. Wow. I mean, over the years, I also race motorcycles. So I've had crashes on the track, very high speeds. But I've had, just one accident on the street, but a lot of near misses. But one of the interesting things about motorcycling, I mean, it is inherently more dangerous, but it also attracts the most dangerous people in society, right?
So there is some operator
Yeah.
component to these.
Right. There's a selectivity, because the people that are the highest risk takers are probably attracted the most to motorcycling. So that, I think, pumps up the numbers even more than you would expect just by having a vulnerable road vehicle.
So what do we know that 17% of all crashes involve motorcycles? So what do we know about motorcycle crashes in general? Is it generally the fault of the motorcyclist? Is it the motorist? We see a lot of these campaigns where they're telling people, watch out for the motorcyclists and all of this, and make it sound like it's sort of maybe the fault is not the motorcyclist. So what do we know about motorcycle crashes? As Fred said, it's an inherently more dangerous vehicle.
Yes, because if we look at the cars first, then over the time we got a airbag, and we have seatbelt, and then we have side airbags. And it's a tremendous improvement from like the 1980s and 1990s. And it's like anecdotally, people say it's hard to kill yourself in a car these days. But for the motorcycles, we don't have an airbag, we don't have a seatbelt, and we only have a 19th state with a universal helmet law. So basically, at the time of collision or time of crash, that most of the time the riders will be ejected, and there'll be minimum protection that's provided by the motorcycle itself. So we do see that 70% of fatalities from more for the younger groups that are riding a sports bike, but also we can ignore that there is like big portion of aging riders that riding a motorcycle became a number one hobby for child baby boomer. So when you ride a motorcycle in 60s, that you are remembering yourself riding a motorcycle in college, that basically your body is not going to be same as your college time.
Yeah,
so
your reaction time,
Yeah.
your reflexes,
I
all
think the saying is your mind writes checks your body can't cash.
that. Yeah, right? Well, but that's part of the appeal of it, is the recapturing of your youth.
Yeah.
And also, enough of life has gone by that you're willing maybe to take those risks that you weren't willing to take when you were younger, or perhaps you don't have the people in your life who are telling you not to take those risks.
Right. And there's also, from the driver's perspective, driver of cars, there is a visibility problem with motorcycles. And one of the most common motorcycle accidents, it has a car turning left in front of a motorcycle. And that's, my one street accident was exactly that case. And the guy said he saw the car behind me, but did not see me at all. And it was like you're almost invisible out there. There is one other point I should mention with motorcycle safety. My crashes on the track, when I have full body armor and everything, I had a crash in Las Vegas at like 90 miles an hour. And I was up and going in the next race. It's amazing, the body protection. I had to take some Advil the next day. I'm not going to lie. But the body protection you can get if you're wearing a full armor outfit, but that's impractical for regular motorcyclists riding on a street. It's amazing technology that is in motorcycle racing suits.
Yeah. So are motorcycles an important part of the transportation mix? Not just in that people are not going to give them up. It's not like we can ban motorcycles tomorrow and say that they're just inherently dangerous and we shouldn't have them. What role are they playing? Is it an affordability role? You talked about the whole freedom and the mystique of the motorcycle, the motorcycle club, the whole history of the sort of this romantic, dangerous sort of feel and look. But there are many people all the way from like just above scooters at the lowest level motorcycles up to even bigger ones, where it's also an affordability issue, especially in this day and age with gas prices. So how does it fit into the multimodal mix?
So motorcycle itself is very interesting in a way because it's 3% of population, but it does have very well developed subgroup cultures. So you have the people riding 50cc scooters. And in many states, the scooter is over 50cc will be considered a motorcycle. So if you're riding a 75cc scooter, that's a motorcycle. And then you have a 125, 250 riding like a standard bike. and then it goes to the like a small sports bike where it's somewhere between 600cc to 100cc, the 1000cc. And then you have a big bike, Indian. You have fully dressed Harley like a Road King. Is way above the size of compact car and price-wise the same. So you have such a big spectrum of motorcycles. So it's hard to define like where the motorcycle fitting in the culture of the United States. Because about 50% people riding a motorcycle they use for their commute, but another 50% is more of a recreational purpose. And like so that it's more like their weekend vehicle.
They're out weekend warrioring and hitting the backcountry roads. That biker bar that's out on 41 in the middle of nowhere that I always used to drive past and see lineup of bikes. The bikes are out there on our roads. Our roads generally are designed, maybe entirely, for automobiles. What does that mean for motorcycle riders in terms of their safety? Is there any aspect of the roads that are motorcycle friendly?
I guess we are getting into the very dangerous territory in terms of talking about it. Because I used to say to people, a motorcycle is not a design vehicle, because when we design the road, that there is a different guideline from the Ash to Green Book and MUTCD. But if you look at those manuals and books, there's no word motorcycles. So which means like when we design the roadway, we're not necessarily focused on or more of, I want to say more, we can be more inclusive on the motorcycle, but like many things we design is based on standard cars and SUVs and like trucks, not necessary for motorcycles.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point, because motorcycles accelerate, decelerate, everything is much better than a car, but still, there are some safety features. I know a couple years back, they were putting in median barriers that had the chains between them. Yeah, I guess it's not chains, it's cables.
A cable, yeah, like a wire cable.
So
yeah.
but it's basically a motorcycle rider called a cheese cutter.
Right.
Yeah.
And there's that. And then also when you hit the poles, you have this concentrated force. So it's something that was great for cars, but just a disaster for motorcyclists, right?
Dr. Lee, I know you've done research on motorcycle crashes, especially on rural two-lane highways. What did you study and what did you find?
In Florida, we don't have that many curves. Yeah. So when there's curves, that it becomes the destination for motorcycle riders in Florida. Yeah. So we found a couple of locations that has a pretty good history of the motorcycle crashes. So we actually try to see what can be the potential countermeasure to reduce the motorcycle crash in that particular location. So the DOT, the Department of Transportation, installed the so-called dynamic speed feedback signs. So you see when you drive a car, it's like blinking and saying you're too fast or you're showing that your speed. So many times we installed those and it was very effective for cars. And with the same line of idea in that particular location, DOT installed that system. But over the time, we have our doubt whether it's working for motorcyclists too. But during the study, what we found interesting is that device itself is oftentimes calibrated for the cars, which has a much bigger facade. When you have signs for the motorcyclist, it does not capture the motorcycle as effectively as should be because of the small facade of the motorcycle. So that when it comes to the motorcycle at the curve, that the blinking sign doesn't work until it gets very close to the signs. It almost becomes a visual distraction. So that's what we found. That it is a difficult problem that you will not be able to adjust the sensor to be more effective for motorcycle. Then you will start to pick up the cars on the other lanes. It's just a difficult issue to tackle.
How much of the issue is also just behavioral, and that's a hard piece to get to?
Well, 100% can be behavior issue. I got like just press
right,
that.
You're driving the bike.
Yeah. The people on the bike is different from people not on the bike, for sure.
Yeah. And I should mention that turning a motorcycle is not an easy task because it's counterintuitive. I don't know if we wanted to get into some of the details, but to turn a motorcycle to the left, you actually have to turn the wheels to the right, and then you lean into the curve. And there have been studies that have shown when riders get into panic situations, they actually turn right into the object they're trying to miss. And that whole, it's called countersteering. And people say, that doesn't make, if you go out on your bicycle, you can even say, oh yeah, you do it instinctively. But the problem is, and that's what makes curves particularly dangerous, getting the right speed and then remembering all these counterintuitive things.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I would like to add something to that is braking. Unlike a cars, motorcycle has two brakes, front brake and rear brake. And the front brake is you have to use your right hand. And then for the brake, you have to use your foot. But people who are riding a motorcycle, most of the time they're driving their car too. So when they get into panic situation, first instant reaction is they will step on the brake, which is the rear brake has much less power. The front brake has about 70% of braking power. So you should apply the both brake at the same time without locking up the front brake. That's quite a skill that you need to work on to polish it.
Yeah, or else you're over the handlebars.
Well, there is that fear. I can tell you in racing, most racers don't use the back brake at all. It's just you use it because if you're at that speed, you should have near 100% of the braking force on the front. Many studies have shown that people overuse the back brake a lot. And it depends on the motorcycle too. If you're doing a Harley, the back brake is more important. If you're doing a sport bike, the back brake is basically useless. And you can tell if you look at the size of the discs on the motorcycle, that sort of tells you what the optimal brake force distribution should be. If you look at a sport bike, it has a really big discs on the front and the back just has a small disc because of the weight transfer, the front. But again, as was pointed out, mastering that distribution, that brake force distribution, comes with a lot of experience. Now, there have been anti-lock brakes, and I have not ridden a bike with anti-lock brakes, but I think that might help to some extent to get a better stopping distance for motorcycles.
Sure. There's a study came out from the Insurance Institute of Highway Safety. They're showing the benefit of the ABS. But again, that it comes to the sort of ego fight over can do better than the technology. But it's a very beneficial product for the average Joe rider who are not riding every day or maybe riding once in a week. Having a motorcycle with ABS will save them one day for sure.
When you were talking about the motorcyclists also defaulting back to how to drive a car, because we were all trained how to drive a car, we had to go to class. In my place, it was the head football coach was the driver's head coach too. And, we learned how to drive a car in high school, but there's not the same thing for motorcycles. Are motorcyclists woefully undereducated, underprepared, and, just have to sort of learn their own way and hope they don't get into trouble until they sort of master the bike?
Well, I don't want to say they're undereducated, but I want to say that riding a motorcycle is a perishable skill. So you need to keep up. Like you've been riding for 30 years. It's funny that like whenever you get into the conversation with motorcyclists, they always say, I've been riding 20 years. I've been riding 30 years. They basically like set up their position of the hierarchy to start the conversation. But in fact, that their friends will say, oh, okay, you own the motorcycle for 30 years, but not you rode a motorcycle for 30 years. So like many times, as I said, it's a recreational vehicle. So it's not necessary they commute on the motorcycle every day. It is important for them to be able to keep up their riding skills. Like Fred just mentioned about like racing. So you cannot compare like how much of the effort they're putting into the braking skills, people who are racing.
And that's a good point. If you look at northern states, there are noticeable spikes in motorcycle crashes like in April, March and April, where these people haven't ridden a motorcycle for 3 or 4 months. They get out. It takes time.
The first dog. I'm going to get out there and
right.
go.
And, as mentioned, it is a perishable skill. Your whole skill set on motorcycles, deteriorate over time. So they have to constantly be refreshed.
In this day and age, so behaviorally, the way the roads are built, the way all of the aspects of it, how dangerous is it? Is my wife right? I guess I'm asking. Is it an unacceptably dangerous thing? Obviously, I think it is to some degree. Otherwise, you guys wouldn't be working on increasing the safety of it.
I mean, I would say riding a motorcycle maybe or for surely dangerous than joining a book club. For sure. But, like you also need to understand there are many people, including Fred, been riding and enjoying a motorcycle for like extended time. It's not necessarily, you get in a motorcycle, you're in trouble. But then there are things that you need to do. You need to wear protective gears. And then you need to be able to practice as needed and then also regularly. And then you also need to be very conservative when you choose to ride a motorcycle. Like you don't ride like in certain conditions and you don't ride when you're especially intoxicated. So there are things like it's the same as driving a car. And it's like something to be pointed out. It is a vehicle that has poor injury outcome. When you get into the crash on motorcycle, you have more of a change of G-force that needs to be absorbed by the rider itself. That's something that you need to keep in mind.
I should give you my own experience. My parents would not let me near a motorcycle. So it wasn't until I was in my early 30s that I started riding, and then just like went crazy. I got racing license and everything, but I still kept the racing license from my wife. She thought I was going to the track watching the races when I was actually in the races. And it came to light. She took me out to Father's Day and my name was in the program and I was sort of busted. But I remember going to the motorcycle, when I was buying one of the motorcycles, I was saying, my wife is really against this. And I'm sure they hear this all the time. He said, well, if she loves you, she'll get over it. So still, they have all of these little techniques.
Of disarming that piece of the equation.
But it is a big thing, because a lot of your family members try to keep you off the guards, so they are inherently dangerous. I think they may have, it depends on the rider, obviously, and people probably fear motorcycles more than they should. But I'm not going to lie. I mean, it is a dangerous.
Y'all have been studying this and looking at it and doing various different safety programs. What needs to be done? What have you been looking at? What have you found? What can we do to take some of that edge off at least?
I think certainly we have some homework to do to improve motorcycle safety. Over the time, we are looking at just motorcycles as a whole, but like as we talked about, there is a different segment that requires some different attention and different intervention to help them to make a better choice. And we also need to work with drivers for them to be able to see motorcycle better. I mean, many studies have shown that it's not your eye to see, it's your brain to see. So when you have a competing interest of seeing different things, we will not be able to remember it. So we think we saw, but it doesn't get registered into your brain. So that basically you will not act on the scene. We will need more understanding and incorporate into some of the policies.
Yeah, one of the things I think about when I think about sort of the future of cars and the future of this transit and all of that kind of thing is, government regulation, obviously. Now we have to wear seatbelts. We have to do certain things. Now we have cars with driver assists and all of these other developments. And as you said, motorcycles, because they really reach an audience that values freedom and freedom from those regulations, I almost feel like government takes sort of a caveat. You ride a motorcycle, that's on you. But do you see the future of motorcycles sort of becoming inherently more safe, having ABS or requiring those kind of things? Or is it always going to be for just that 3% of the population?
So for European countries, the ABS is mandated. All the manufacturers in European countries, ABS mandated a long time ago. But we don't have that. So come to the motorcycle safety, the United States takes a little different starting line, because we are the only developed country without a universal helmet law. So that's something that people are arguing all the time. But I would say, when you ride a motorcycle and wearing helmet is good decision. It's something that you should consider doing it. I'm not talking, I don't want to get into whether we need a helmet or not. But as a writer, as a researcher who looked at this subject for a long time, I see the significant benefit of wearing a helmet at the time of collision. But you cannot tell whether I'm going to crash today or not. So it's better to be prepared.
Yeah, to me, when I was first licensed in Washington State, it was a requirement to be helmeted. But I cannot imagine riding without a helmet. And the crashes I've had, obviously the ones on the racetrack, the helmet was just, but even the one in the street, if I didn't have a helmet on, the fact that the U.S. does not have a universal helmet is just astonishing. Can't understand. We have universal seatbelts. But anyway,
you don't see people saying, I'm going to opt out of seatbelts and the airbag thing because America. It sounds like the big advice is with great freedom comes great personal responsibility. You have to, if you are a motorcyclist, if you choose to drive a motorcycle either for your commute or for recreation, There's a lot of work, training, understanding, and safety you want to consider. You really do, not just get out there and go, I rode a bike when I was a kid, so how hard can this be?
There's a saying among the motorcycling community, say, oh, it's my time to go, it's my time to go. But we as a state, we lost about 500 people on the motorcycle crashes last year, actually 550. But think about the family members and daughters and sons who left behind. It's very sad to see. They told people that it's the worst way to kill yourself. If you have a stage 4 cancer, you still have 3 months to tell and say goodbye to your family members. But it's like you went out on a motorcycle in the morning and you don't come home. That's, to me, that's such a bad way, such a tragic to the family members.
So what's next in terms of research, Dr. Lee?
One of the interesting projects we started is that over the time, there were many questions about the motorcycle VMT, the vehicle miles traveled. So we didn't know how many miles. I mean, we kind of knew, but we didn't know for sure that how many miles be ridden by the riders in the state. So we are working on a project that how we can improve to the methodology to measure those VMT for motorcycles. So hopefully we will be able to tell people that how many miles being ridden by the people in Florida every year.
Well, thank you so much. This has been a topic I've been really looking forward to doing this season on Out of My Lane, because just the whole mystique of motorcycles. And I think, and it's not just boys versus girls. I follow a bunch of people on Instagram, and one of them is a baker, a semi-famous baker, and she just got a bike and everyone's weighing in. Oh my gosh, you're going to die. And so it just fascinates me how auto-centric we are and need to be to some degree. The discussion over motorcycles obviously will be ongoing, as will your research. Dr. Mannering, Dr. Lee, thank you so much for coming. And out there in our audience, thanks for listening to Out of My Lane, podcast from the Center for Urban Transportation Research at USF Tampa. We will see you the next episode. Bye-bye.
The National Institute for Congestion Reduction, NICR, is a transportation research center focused on innovative congestion strategies. The center is composed of researchers from the University of South Florida, the University of California, Berkeley, Texas A&M University, and the University of Puerto Rico at Mayagüez, and funded by the United States Department of Transportation. For more information, please visit www.nicr.usf.edu.